put up the audio version from last week. Oh Lord.
One step at a time. We'll get there.
Oh, this week. I'm ready for it to be over. It'll end on Sunday. Yeah. Okay. It's all good. All right. Um, I'm just gonna put in here. Was it 4.4, right?
What's for?
26.0.4.
Oh, yes.
Right for the okay. I should probably just open that. Have our link. Okay. And then, do you need any links or anything for talking about the Masters Tour?
Um, I guess so. Sure. I shouldn't say no.
Let's see, did I have one in there from previously? No. Okay.
What's up, Saku?
Well, I don't see like anything that they did to put out for afterwards, so I guess
Yeah,
I'll
I don't
just link
think they
to.
did like anything. It's all very low effort.
Yeah. Okay. There's that. And this one. Okay. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. Yeah, because usually they post like the day after. They post like an article with like talking about who won and kind of a breakdown.
Yeah.
Nothing.
It's the whole system's on life support. Maybe the nearly 20K average viewers on Twitch might at least convince them to not cancel the program entirely, though.
Yeah. I hope they at least get some mods.
They might not cancel it. Optimism.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Perfect. Yes. Hello, everybody. Hello. All right. Are you ready, sir?
Ready.
All right. Welcome to episode 24 of the TCCG Roundtable. We're your host, dragonrider and RonMexico. How's it going?
Hey, it's going great. How are you today?
Doing okay. Now that I've gotten like I had to go to the, doctor this morning and get some like follow-up shots and then came home and then had to clean up after the puppy. So once
Yeah,
I
puppy
got
missed
that,
you. Said, "Hey, I got a surprise for you."
yeah, but I would not like those surprises anymore. Thanks,
Yeah,
puppy.
yeah.
um,
He's still learning.
so
He's still trying to figure it out.
yeah. So that was not what I was hoping to come home to. But once that got taken care of, I was like, okay, we're a little bit better. So it is Friday, so hey, that's
Yeah. Presents, mom, come see.
yeah. Don't.
Yeah.
You know what, puppy? You are the present. I don't need anything additional. Thank you. Just give me like little kisses on the face or something. That's it.
Yeah. But
Uh,
it is Friday, We're
yes,
almost at the end of the week. It's good.
exactly. Well, before we jump into our bit of news and organized play, I just want to like touch base. What do we have going on? Do we have anything that we've got going on? Just like over this week, over this next coming like month that we want to bring up. I know I do. So, but what about you, Ron? What are things looking like for Ron Mexico?
This next week is really not a whole lot more than just a whole lot of Hearthstone for me, which is pretty similar to other weeks. Um, the the one like slight difference is at least just like over this weekend is the end of the month, so it's try to qualify for a Masters Tour season. I'm sort of in striking distance. I think it isn't realistic that I could get a finish at this point, but I'll still give it a try. Just see what I can do. So the weekend I'll be jamming a lot of games of Hearthstone with a deck I think is kind of broken, and we'll see how far I can take it. Um, and then just normal stuff throughout the week. But I am excited to hear what you have going on. What do you have cooking?
Yeah. Well, I am always rooting for you. I do hope that that you're able to kind of get back into that range. Um, I know this month I feel like has been just really rough for the Hearthstone ladder. Like for a lot of players, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like the climb and getting ranks has been pretty rough. But I am excited. It's still a few weeks out, so I'm sure we'll be talking about it over the next handful of weeks here, a couple of weeks. But the third weekend of May, I will be going to TCG Con in Denver. I'm so
Hey.
excited. And not only that, but if anybody does remember, a little ways back, we had, I think this was before you joined in, Ron, but we had Based Inc. join us, and I'm so excited. She lives decently close to me, but we've become pretty good friends. She is, along with you, one of our Amber Flight Gaming like department leads. So she is actually going to be driving to here to hang out with me for like a day or so, and then her and I and my husband are going to be going from here to Denver for that convention. So I'm so excited. I get to meet her in person. We get to go to the convention.
That's
I'm going to be,
awesome.
yeah. So I'm like, yay, meeting people and going to places. Like, yay. um, I am going to be competing or trying to compete, I guess. Like I'm gonna try my hand at it, but the Soulforge Fusion Ultimate Championship silver event is happening at TCG Con. They have like a handful of those throughout the year, but some conventions and some of these bigger events and stuff, they are running some of these kind of bigger tournaments. They'll have side events and stuff there as well. It's gonna be a lot of card games happening at the convention. I've been to a couple of different things before, like back in, I think it was 2011, we went to BlizzCon. We've gone to a couple of Dream Hacks, but this is going to be the first time I'm going to something that's just for card games. So I'm like, ooh, I'm so
Yeah,
excited.
it's
Like,
pretty sweet.
yeah, I think we talked about it when we had Jared from Citizens of Larkana on, right? We were talking about like Disneyland and the Disney parks and stuff. And it was like, yeah, like roller coasters aren't really my thing. And then I said, give me like a card game, convention. And then literally I found out that's a thing. And I was like, oh, and there's one in Denver, which is actually pretty close to me. So I'm like,
There you
oh my
go.
God.
It's
I'm
your
so
mecca.
excited.
It'll be
I
great.
know. Oh, just give me some coffee while I'm there and I will be so good. So yeah, I'm very, very excited for that. But kind of in preparation for that, I do want to do some content, and I ordered some like little clip-on microphones and stuff to be able to do, hopefully some like interviews with people while I'm there. So we can definitely
Oh,
like talk
nice.
about it afterwards. Yeah. So,
I love
if
that.
you're, yeah. So I'm excited. If you're interested in card games and talking about people's experience being at like a convention and playing cards or competing in person, that kind of stuff. I'm hoping to get some interviews with people while I'm there and put together some stuff there. And then, of course, once I'm back, you and I will talk about that for sure and kind of how that went. And I'll share, my experience. But I'm so excited.
I'm looking forward to dragonrider reporting live from TCG Con. Round up
Oh my
a
god.
whole bunch of major players. It'll be great.
I need to start some videos like that. This is Dragon Rider reporting live from TCG Con Denver. I'm here with yes. So this is also the first actual like vacation or like trip or something fun that I'll be doing since February of 2020. So it's been more than 3 years
Yeah.
since I've done anything. So this is it. Might be like a small convention. It might not feel like a big thing for some people, but for me, I'm like, this feels like a huge thing. So
COVID hits
yes,
hard, you know? You just
yeah,
like, all right, I guess we're not leaving for a while or going anywhere or doing anything. So that's
yeah,
super exciting that you get to do that. I am
yeah.
personally, I'm also looking forward to a vacation eventually that will happen. But my
Yes.
partner's in nursing school right now. It's we don't have time. But so I'm a little bit jealous of the trip to TCG Con, but I'm very happy for you. I hope you have a great time.
Yes, thank you, thank you. I think it's pretty exciting to see. And this year I've started to see, talking about card games and stuff as well. There's a lot of conventions I think that are kind of happening throughout this year that are kind of featuring card games, and card games are going to these conventions as well. So really kind of seems like things are kind of amping up in terms of some of this stuff, which I think is also kind of exciting just for kind of card games in general, especially after we recently saw news that E3 has been canceled again this year. It might come back, but honestly, it's kind of seeming likely that E3 is not going to be maybe a thing anymore. A
Maybe
lot
it
of
died.
the Yeah, I mean it's really hard for them to do stuff that was kind of really focused on in person. I think they tried to do some virtual stuff, but just not quite the same. And a lot of the publishers and game companies and different stuff that go to E3 have kind of all started moving towards like their own things, right? Like Nintendo does the Nintendo Directs where they basically share their own news. Um, just a lot of the companies are kind of moving in that direction, it seems like, and doing their own things. So to see the like, hey, TCG Con is a thing. I know at Gamma, I think I hadn't heard of that one until very recently. Um, there were some really cool like featured stuff for Disney Lorcana and Battle Spirit Saga, maybe Soulforge Fusion. I think are all going to be at um, what's the one I'm thinking? They're all going to be at Gen Con in early August.
Oh yeah.
That's a huge one. Um, I think there's also been some stuff I've seen in the Soulforge Fusion Discord. Some talk about they just like kind of announced an event that's going to be happening at Origins. So it's really seeming like some of those kind of more tabletop focused in person events might still be doing pretty well. So I think that's pretty exciting, and to be able to kind of see some of these events kind of starting back up and kicking things off again after kind of that long period through COVID.
Definitely.
Still, everyone, please like be safe when you go to these things. But yeah, kind of cool to see these things kind of starting back up and having a large card game interest.
Yeah, hopefully you know, not too many people get uh sick from the convention because yeah, the last time I went to DreamHack, I remember coming back with a COVID. That wasn't pleasant. Michelle was
Yes,
unhappy
you
at me,
did.
unhappy with me because I gave her COVID like immediately
Oh,
after, and she's like, "What the
yeah.
hell?" I was like, "I'm sorry." So just be safe, you know, wash hands. It's it's totally fine to still wear a mask, you know, it's protection and stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with me. I'm just very excited, looking forward to that. So you know, if anybody does kind of have any questions or anything that you're maybe excited to hear about, like about the experience overall or anything like that, let me know so I can kind of keep those things in mind ahead of time and make sure that I pay attention to those when I'm there. Um, but let's get into the couple of news pieces that we have. Honestly, again, like I didn't really gather a ton of news. There might be some other stuff here, but um, the big one, and we're going to be talking more about this and kind of a general patch information during our main topic, but for Hearthstone, patch 26.0.4 came out this week. It was kind of teased, introed, I guess, on Tuesday, and then it released on Thursday. So that came out with a ton of changes. We have Battle Spirit Saga, the full game officially releasing April 28th. That's today. Today,
Oh
this
yeah,
weekend. That's right. It's coming out.
it's finally
So
here.
that's right.
You're
Man,
the moment you've all been waiting for,
that's
Battle
right.
Spirits Saga fans. It's today.
That's right.
Go
Yes.
crazy.
And then the other thing that I have is Legends of Runeterra. In game right now, they have some daily login rewards that you can get. There's like 7 days worth of some login rewards because they are celebrating 3 years. I am honestly, I can't believe that Legends of Runeterra has only been out for 3 years. I don't know why, but it feels like much longer to me. I'm like, wasn't it like closer to Hearthstone? Hearthstone just celebrated like 9 years or 10 years, right? 10 or nine, and then it's
Nine,
like,
nine,
yeah, I
10,
think
9,
I don't remember.
9.
So I'm
It was
like,
it was definitely 9.
okay, yeah, yeah, 9, yeah, and then it's like, wow, Runeterra's only been 3 years. I don't know. I for some reason I feel like it's been longer. So that's pretty cool. They've got some like little, kind of birthday celebration themed stuff, like a little, kind of party cake, card back that you can get and stuff. So if you are someone who even plays kind of casually, make sure that you are logging in to Legends of Runeterra over the next like 10, 11 days to get those rewards.
It's kind of funny to me. You have the opposite perception of Runeterra than I do. So I just like never played Runeterra or engaged with it at all. I remember like hearing when it came out, and then I was like, "Whoa, 3 years already?"
That's fair. Yeah. We kind of have the same like mixed feelings in our live chat as well. Like, wow, 3 years. Like, oh, it's so young. So yeah, that's something that's pretty cool. I feel like there's been a lot of things that have changed in the game, which is kind of great. But we talked earlier in this year about how they also just kind of had their first rotation and
Right, yeah.
set that up. So I I'm kind of curious now. I feel like I want to go look back at like Hearthstone and see when they implemented like Wild and see like how far into Hearthstone that was and kind of compare and see like when did these games like what age you know when are card games old enough to get additional game modes or get a rotation. Um, is that like when they enter adolescence? Is that what we're calling it?
Well, I have an answer for you. The
All
Wild
right.
format was introduced in April of 2016. So 7 years ago, which means Hearthstone is about 2 years
Two.
old
Okay.
when the Wild format was introduced.
Okay. So a couple years in, it seems like, is when these card games are kind of introducing that. So seems fair. Seems kind of on par then, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
But yeah, so that's what we have for news this week. Ron, you want to take it away with our competitive and organized play?
absolutely. So starting off with Hearthstone, um, in competitive and organized play, we just recently had the Masters Tour, and the results of the Masters Tour, of course, um, through those 16 players with the $50,000 prize pool that took place on April 22nd and 23rd. Our winner was Levick. And Levick played pretty amazing throughout the whole tournament. He had some pretty interesting um, like tweaks in his lineup too. For instance, a lot of players brought Outcast Demon Hunter, but I think he was the only one who brought Hawkstrider Ranchers in his Outcast Demon Hunter, making some of those wide boards a lot more difficult to remove by giving them death rattles that also summoned. And it was incredibly relevant in one of his late tournament games. I can't remember if it was top 4, top 8 that had happened, but where he played against Gamer RVG, and if it wasn't for the rancher, it was highly likely that, he would have just had his boards continually cleared and he might have lost that game. But because of his deck building decisions, wound up taking the victory there. He also was one of the only players to actually bring a Blood Death Knight. Most players opted for a Frost Death Knight. And Levick just played incredible throughout the whole tournament. He was our grand prize winner. And it means that he doesn't have to try hard on ladder for the rest of the time. He can just cruise because he's a Masters Tour winner, so he's gonna get that invitation to Worlds, which is what all these players are really really striving for. There's a pretty impressive field all the way through. Pocket Train, I know, made it to the top four. Wolder, who I believe was Levick's practice partner, it's pretty incredible how that happens, was in the final game against Levick. So all those things just really impressive performances and a great fun tournament to watch. They put it on Twitch finally again and got somewhere close to 20,000 average viewers. So interest is still absolutely there in Hearthstone esports. The viewership is there. Hopefully, at the very least they won't kill the program. We can hope and dream.
That's right. Yeah, I feel like I saw it kind of fluctuate a bit between like 16,000 to 20,000, kind of depending.
Yeah.
And at first, the first like few hours of the first day, I saw so many people like, 20,000. And I was sitting there thinking, wait until the like several hours pass for the card packs and then see if viewership drops after like everyone's earned their,
Yeah.
the Twitch drops. But it didn't really like change all that much. Like I said, kind of, I feel like I saw it fluctuate a bit between like the 16,000 and 20,000, but
Yeah, I don't feel like I
that's
ever
still
saw
pretty
it drop
solid.
below 16, which is pretty
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. So I was at least happy about that. At least it wasn't like, oh, like there's 20,000 for the packs, and then as soon as everybody gets their drops, then it went to like 4,000 or something. So it
That'd
was
be
good to
rough.
see that it at
Yeah.
least stayed. Yeah.
Yeah. In other card games for competitive and organized play, we have for Magic, we have coming up from May 5th through the 7th, 2023, is Magic Con Minneapolis. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitive and organized play news, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has announced that the next Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series will take place in Cancun on September 16th through the 17th of 2023. And then in Flesh and Blood, the first of the two Pro Tour events is happening with Pro Tour Baltimore, and that has finally started. It is this weekend, right now, 27th through the 30th. So it's a big event. It's already, I guess, on day two. Will be interesting to hear what kind of results we have with that Pro Tour.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very interesting, but I I'm a little bummed that they only have two for the year, but that's as we've talked about with like Hearthstone, sometimes there's cuts or things that have to happen, so we'll see how that goes. But
Yeah.
it's always cool to see like the big events and um there are as this one with the big events, just like Magic, this one, just like Pokemon, just like all that stuff, right? There's like the main event, and then they all have like side events and some other things going on. So it's really cool to see that, I think, that a lot of these tournaments are having like side events. So you can go and like watch or meet the people who might be competing that had earned a spot in like the main event, and you could go and try your hand at side events or other stuff. So it makes like a whole kind of convention thing out of it instead of it just being um, kind of like what Hearthstone does, right? Where it's like it's just the tournament
Yeah.
that's only like the people that qualified and that's it. So it gets like more of the community and people involved, which I think is really cool. So I hope that we do see like a lot of positive things come out from tournaments like this. I think the Magic ones have seemed to do really well. Like the World Championship last year seemed to have gone really, really well. It seemed like people really enjoyed that. seemed like there had been a pretty good turnout for like people showing up and doing that stuff. So I hope that continues for all of these other card games as well.
Agreed.
All right. Well, I think it is the time to get into our roundtable topic of this week, Ron. We're going to be focusing a bit on the Hearthstone changes because it was a really, really big patch. But I think what we're going to do is not just necessarily focus it completely on Hearthstone. We're also going to take a look kind of at just how like these big patches, how balance changes affect the metas. I think especially for digital card games, because we kind of see this in all of the card games where cards get changed, a patch comes out, or even between patches, you know, on like socials, right? You'll see some people who are like, this card or these few cards are so overpowered, they need nerfs. And then you have people on the other side who are like, these cards are fine, don't touch them. You know, like even in Hearthstone, right? We had Bran. Some people were like, Bran needs to go, get rid of Bran. And some people were like, I love Bran, don't get rid of Bran, don't change Bran. And then, kind of at the same time, when balance changes happen, sometimes you have people who say, "Oh, this is great. The balance changes, you know, really did a lot for the meta," or "I'm having so much fun now after the changes." Then you have the, you know, kind of the other side where they say, "This didn't change anything. The meta stayed the same." So we're gonna kind of talk about a little bit of a breakdown and maybe some reasons for some of that. In the midst of also talking about the Hearthstone changes specifically. So, do you want to start, Ron? You want to kind of go through a little bit about like what those changes were?
Absolutely. So, to start off, as far as Hearthstone itself is concerned, in the patch that came out, there were 29 changes that came through. 28 cards got changed. 27 of them were cards in Standard. One of them was a change for Wild. Um, I don't know exactly what the perception of the patch is in the Wild community right now, but I have to imagine it has to be um, primarily positive since Twig of the World Tree was absolutely breaking the Wild meta, and that card has been dramatically changed to no longer enable the kind of play patterns that it did. So that seems to be a very good thing. As far as Standard is concerned, though, out of the 27 cards that changed, um, most of them currently are still not seeing play, which is a bit unfortunate. I don't think the devs necessarily would have wanted that as the outcome. And then there's one other change that happened, and it was an overall class change, um, like a uh, it was part of the nerfs, I guess, rather than the buffs. So 3 things got nerfed, and then the rest were all increases to power level. And Death Knight being changed is, I think, the one thing that's going to have the most dramatic impact on the Hearthstone meta now, and Hearthstone in the future indefinitely too. And that is that all Death Knight cards with any 3 rune requirements are now removed from discover pools and random generation of effects. And that's huge. I mean, we're talking like Vampiric Blood, a triple rune card. You can no longer discover or generate like infinite ones of those to get essentially infinite health. Um, with Frostworm's Fury, another triple rune card, you can no longer infinitely discover things like that and just freeze your opponent's board infinitely while making stats for yourself. And that those are, I think, really important positive changes. Um, the unfortunate side of things is that if you're playing at a higher legend, the rest of the changes haven't really had much of an impact at all on the overall meta, and everyone seems to be primarily just playing older decks, and even decks that got nerfed. So Frost Death Knight technically got 3 nerfs with the Discover nerf, Rowdy Fan, which was run in that deck, and Overseer Frigidara, to lose a couple of attack points. that deck still might be one of the absolute best in the meta, and people are still just playing it, along with other decks that were totally unaffected by the patch or barely affected. There are a lot of other cards, like 7 warrior buffs, a few mage buffs. It's brought back Naga Mage, which is something that has some toxic play patterns that a lot of people complain about, but doesn't appear to be too powerful. Hunter got some buffs, Shaman got buffs, Warlock got buffs, Rogue got a couple cards that they wouldn't ever dream of running in their best list get buffed, so Rogue kind of ignores that. Priest got 1 buff, but it's not in a viable Priest archetype. Druid got buffs to try to coerce them to play the bad Druid deck. Ultimately though, it's one of those things where you're gonna see a lot of mixed reaction from the community, and a lot of it sadly is gonna be negative. I understand the reason why though, because you definitely have the hope when there's nearly 30 changes that you're going to see a pretty significantly different meta than what you had just been seeing. And the reality is, we're not really seeing things all that different from what they were before this giant patch came out.
Yeah. So I think that kind of brings up one of these bullet points that we have in our notes, which is, so far. Now, I will say, as we're recording this, it has been 24 hours now, like 24 hours and 6 minutes since the patch dropped. So, still very, very early in the patch. Sometimes new decks or different things kind of take a little bit of time to surface as people start experimenting with stuff. But yeah, so far, like you mentioned, especially at those higher ranks, it really does seem like there's been pretty little impact. But part of that, as you mentioned, is kind of people's expectations of what they expect to happen, right? And I think this applies to all card games. I feel like we've seen this in the Magic community. We've seen this in like Marvel Snap, where a change goes in and then people go, well, that didn't do anything. Well, because like you said, they kind of expect, especially when they see this many cards, they go, oh wow, so many cards changing, it's gonna just shake everything up, there's gonna be all these different decks. And then
Yeah.
they kind of have that in their head, is that that's what they expect to happen. And if it doesn't, then they're like, oh well, that did nothing, that was a terrible patch, this sucks, those weren't even good enough. Where sometimes it does take a little bit of time before those things happen, or maybe there was like 1 or 2 other changes that maybe should have been included to make more of that expectation feel like it's met.
But
So
we all love to overreact. Like, as soon as something
what?
happens, you're like, okay, I want my instant gratification. And I had stars in my eyes. I see all these changes. So obviously everything's going to be dramatically different immediately. And it didn't happen. What a colossal disappointment. Everything is ruined. They did nothing. What anything have changed? Like, all that stuff, it's day one. Settle down. You know, um, there are some very valid concerns about the direction that it's going, but we all just collectively like to have a dramatic, like, knee jerk response, but that may not be you know too in line with what we're actually going to end up with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think another example of that even is I haven't felt like I've really seen this as much the last year or so, but I remember it used to really be a thing when everybody would say, oh, I can't believe they're doing these theory craft streams. All of these people are going to figure out the meta before the expansion even launches, and everyone was so upset, right? They're going to figure this out. Everyone's just going to play all these decks, and then it's not even going to, it's all going to be solved. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. And the Theorycraft streams also have a requirement of having to use 10 of the new cards in their deck, which oftentimes we see that a lot of the meta decks do not use that many cards from an expansion
Yep.
when it launches. So that does change things up a lot. And especially when that's like a third of your deck, that's quite significant. So there, yeah, that kind of expectation of what's going to happen or not happen. And as you mentioned, sometimes there's decks that aren't really impacted. There, as you mentioned, like a lot of warrior cards changed, a lot of other stuff, but Demon Hunter didn't really get touched. Um, Shadow Priest, I don't know, that didn't really seem to get touched either. Some of the decks, as you said, like Frost Death Knight, did get touched, but at the same time, it didn't really need, I guess, those changes to be
Oh,
powerful.
yeah, it
Like,
was like a very light slap on the wrist.
yeah,
To be fair, like they technically had 3 changes, but one of the changes was your really powerful card gives 1 singular less attack. Your other really powerful card that you don't really care about using for its attack power lost 2 attack power. And your super broken discovers are now not as broken.
yeah,
Like, it's still really good, and they barely hit it with nerfs. There's like, um, I don't know, something smaller than a nerf gun, like less impactful than a nerf. Yeah.
yeah. So that kind of then goes into our next point that we have is, well, sometimes if there's not really an impact, especially at the beginning, then you kind of take a look and see, okay, why do we think that there's really not a lot of changes going on with this patch, especially, at the beginning, right? And one of those things is, as you mentioned, kind of older decks or decks that were strong before. Maybe they didn't really get impacted. And so then people just go, okay, cool. Well, like this deck didn't get touched, so I'm just going to keep playing this deck.
Hmm.
Or on the other, side, maybe you have players who they kind of said this deck was strong beforehand. Maybe they were playing something like Demon Hunter that, again, maybe it didn't really get as many changes or none, and that's like their only deck or one of their only 2 decks that they have if they don't have a lot of cards or they don't put a lot of money into the game. And then they just say, cool, well, like that's the only deck that I have, so I'm just going to keep playing this deck that I have. On the other hand, if you do have those really big, like heavy nerfs, heavy balance patches, and then people say, hey, I only have this 1 or 2 decks to play, and now it's like literally unplayable, that's also a really big, like, feels bad, right? So I think they also took an approach this patch of trying to do more buffs and hoping that the buffs would kind of bring up the power level of other classes and other cards instead of just like, all right, let's just like slash these powerful cards and say, nope, you can't have them. Because they don't want people to have that enormous, like, feels bad, like, oh, I only play once a week or something, and then, hey, I just logged in, and now the deck that I have sucks, and I can't play, and I'm just not going to come back.
Yeah.
So it sucks because there is like that give and take, and again, like, I feel like I've said this before, but I do not envy the decisions that those devs have to make because whatever they do, they're gonna get crap for, and that's unfortunate. Um, but yeah, I really do wonder sometimes how much of it is a balance of trying to look at maybe like the top players versus like the general, player base and looking at all of the ranks and saying what's going on at all of these ranks.
Right.
Because maybe at like gold and, maybe even in platinum, maybe diamond, maybe people are playing warrior more. It's just at the top levels, it's like not seeing very much play because it doesn't have a good win rate against everything else. But at gold and platinum, maybe a lot of people are like, hey, warrior's cool. Even if I don't have the greatest win rate, they're playing it. So trying to buff maybe, puts in a little bit more of that. Hey, here's like a little nudge. Maybe you'll do a little bit better with it. And you'll keep
Yeah.
playing it.
I mean,
Um,
Warrior definitely needed buffs.
yeah.
Like that is certain. No amount of nerfs was going to make Warrior playable. So it's nice to see that Warrior got some buffs, and it might be fringe playable. Um, with some more nerfs potentially. I feel like this patch makes the likelihood of another incoming patch of nerfs a lot higher. Um, I feel like that's like a cool thing with the design philosophy is that they wanted to go with buffs because they didn't want to lower the power level of things too much. Because when you lower power levels, things get a lot less fun for people who were liking to do those super powerful, like WoW type of plays. Um, but the power level of certain decks is still so much higher than others that, sometimes no amount of buffs is really going to change things there. Like, I mean, the type of mana cheating that certain decks have, or classes even have access to, compared to other classes, they're dramatically different. And I think we've established pretty clearly over 9 years that the most powerful thing you can do in Hearthstone is essentially cheat the fundamental mechanics of the game. If the game says, cards have to cost mana, and say, as an example, on turn 5, you can only spend 5 mana, and then other classes say, yeah, okay, sure, 5 mana, and then they find all these different ways to generate essentially like 30 plus mana worth of things on turn 5. And the deck that they're playing against is like, oh, it's turn 5. I'm going to play my 5 mana card. Okay, well, you lost. That's kind of how that will happen. And I don't know, we're at a point where there are some classes that are just kind of being left in the dust. I think now, maybe I'm going too far off the deep end here, just looking at, what's happening. But I'm sort of getting the idea that maybe we need to scrap the idea of class identities to at least to a certain extent and just give everybody mana cheat, right? Either everyone should have it or no one should have it. Um, to the same extent, to the same like power level. If Rogue has a shadow step, everyone else should have a shadow step. Or Rogue shouldn't have it, one of those things. Um Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know.
Ron Illuminati Mexico. All right. No, I mean it is kind of an interesting point, and I think especially now that they've added additional classes, right? I feel like it's getting much harder for them to really have distinct, uh, you know, class identities, right? They're like, okay, because now you add in Death Knight, but how do you make that different? And a lot of people just said, well, that kind of took over the role of warrior, right? Where like they have kind of the life gain and removal, and it just kind of felt like it took over instead of
Yeah.
warrior. So like, okay, well then if that's the case, well
Or
now,
priest, you
yeah.
know.
So then it's like, okay, well now what do you do for warrior or priest to kind of make those feel different but still
Just
powerful?
just go back to 9 classes. Just remove warrior
Yeah.
and priest from the game. We've upgraded them to demon hunter and death knight. Um I mean, Death Knight has different archetypes to replace Warrior and Priest, and then just get rid of both of them. And Demon Hunter's there too as one of the newer classes. You got 9, easy.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
I don't mean that. Just to be clear,
yeah.
it's good to have 11 classes.
Yeah.
Just hopefully we can bring things more in line balance wise to where the other classes are as playable as the rest of them are.
Yeah. And there's also the looking at and I feel like we say this at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, I think is when it's the most impactful. The amount of cards that are available, I think, really does impact the meta overall
Hmm.
and how much these nerfs or buffs actually do impact, right? Because right now, uh, I'll take Death Knight as an example. Death Knight got introduced last December at the kind of end of the rotational cycle. So it came in when there was essentially the most amount of cards in standard. And they didn't want to make it too overpowered and too strong like they had with Demon Hunter. So they didn't make the cards as good, which then people were like, well, this is not very strong. It's not good. That kind of sucks. We wanted to play the fun new class, and it's not very good. So they increased the power level, and we had kind of like a two or like a tri-fold almost effect with this right now too, because so then what they did is they raised the power level of a lot of Death Knight stuff to bring it up so that it was strong. Then it became really strong. And there were some things like the location that then came in with the mini set, right? I believe, or was that
Yeah,
the
location
set?
came out in the
Yeah.
mini set and completely
And
broke the game.
because it was also being played, has no rune requirement, so it was being played in like all of the Death Knight decks. So it was really really powerful. So then they had a rotation just like earlier this month that took a bunch of cards out for other classes. But at the same time, since Death Knight was so new, nothing rotated out for Death Knight. But then they also had a lot of that stuff still at that higher power level to kind of match it with everything else that was powerful at the end of the year. And now you have that still being very powerful, and all these classes not as powerful. They just lost a lot of their stuff. And then it's like, okay, so now you have this balance of if they go for trying to balance Death Knight and lowering the power level of a lot of those cards, you're just going to have the same problem next year, right? Where, or at the end of the year, where then it's probably not going to be good, and they're just going to have to keep going, raise the power level, lower the power level, raise the power level, lower the power level. And I think that's what led them to end up saying, let's actually make this fundamental change to the Death Knight Discover pool so that we don't have to just go, okay, it's super powerful. Okay, no. And it also allows them to create some pretty cool, powerful triple rune cards that don't have to worry later about, oh, well, now what if we create this great triple blood rune card and then Frost gets to discover it and then, you know. So it kind of eliminates that headache for them in the future. But at the same time, then they're also trying to say, okay, well, how do we now make this like really strong class that we've put in not overpower everything else? And then they've had Warrior that's been struggling for a year. And how do they bring that up enough for it to really actually change?
No, it's a tough job. I don't envy
Yeah.
that job.
Yeah. And it's just, I think I really feel like there was just kind of like that tri-fold effect, right? Where there was just a lot of different like moving parts and pieces going on all at the same time. And on top of that, Death Knight is so different in terms of you have that rune requirement and that deck building difference than all the other classes. So then they have to add in that other layer of like, okay, well, how do we balance this compared to everything else? So it feels like they really had this weird level of, you know, choices for the balance. Like how do we do this and not break things more, I guess.
Yeah.
And again, that factor of trying to make it as appealing to as many people as possible, right? Where if you just nerf something into the ground, then you're gonna have those people who are like, man, that was my deck, or like that's the only class I play, and now it's crap, and that sucks. And they want to try to remove that as much as possible.
There's one more thing that we should also address too when it comes to all of our collective overreactions to the balance patch that just came out yesterday. And I think that's just the timing. You know, like you have in our bullet points for the show notes too, you know, it's the very end of the season. So the timing of this patch when it happens, it's coming at a time when the top level players, the highest level players are doing their absolute best to try to make sure that they can qualify for the next upcoming Masters Tour, and they need, you know, high level finishes. They're going for rank 1, rank 2, rank 5, you know, in that range. And that's where a lot of innovation comes from. That's where a lot of the meta changes come from, is those players at the very top. And then when a deck, really becomes incredibly good and refined, it trickles down to the rest of the meta and other people start playing it and the meta starts changing more. But if all those top level players are so hyper focused on, I've got to qualify, I've got to get this finish, they can't trust an unknown quantity. They might test something for, maybe an hour or two and be like, yeah, this doesn't feel like it's good enough. I'm not going to invest any time and energy into something that might hurt me dramatically with my goals. I'm just going to play the deck that I know is good already and just jam that. So it's also possible that we could see some more significant changes come like May 1st, 2nd through that week, after they're all taking a breather and saying, okay, now I can try to innovate again.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing that I think is kind of a twofold problem. Is first is kind of the way that especially the digital games, and I definitely feel like we've covered this probably
Hmm.
multiple times on this show, is with the digital games especially, we do have access like immediately to information, right? We have immediately you can go watch streamers playing the patch and see what everybody else is playing. The social media, where it's kind of like that instant gratification that you're talking about. Everybody's like, hey, I've played the first hour of the patch. Here's what was good so far. And then, or like they play the same old deck and they say, well, let's see how good or not this is. And then if it's still good, they're like, the patch did nothing. So there is kind of that immediate information and immediate kind of reaction, as well as just being able to post those decks on YouTube or some of those other sites that share data information. You start getting that out like pretty immediately, and people look at that and they want to use that. So it's really kind of like you have that aspect of that immediate information on top of the change to the competitive system this year. Now, there were like top finishes mattered last year, right? But they also had qualifications through other tournaments
Yeah.
for Masters Tours and stuff. This year, as you mentioned, it's the only way to qualify for the competitive stuff is through very, very high top ladder. And when you have those people who are just so focused this end of the month on getting those ranks, or who maybe feel like they can't really spend a lot of time innovating throughout the month, even if this came in like the middle of the month, if they just feel like they can't really try to innovate and they have to just play these same decks, Frost got slightly weaker, but it's still really good. Just keep jamming Frost, and get those high ranks, because that is the only thing that matters for the competitive stuff. Then you kind of have this weird juxtaposition of, yeah, people not really innovating at the top, or like the big kind of pros and people who are putting out content may not be innovating as much, if they're also trying to compete. And that instant information being shared is not being shared with innovative stuff. And then it just looks like the patch is not doing anything. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just kind of like multiple kind of issues all like piled on top of each other at the same
Multiple
time.
snowball effects. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, another part of why we're seeing this, like you're saying, is just because the changes that were made to the competitive scene, it has a a far-reaching impact on the entirety of the game. Even when, you know, at first glance, sometimes it feels like, okay, it's probably not even actually impacting overall, like levels of play in Hearthstone and people's engagement and everything. It still does. The fact that they changed the competitive scene and gutted the program, you know, they made it to where only like the absolute best of the best have any shot at the competitive scene. And when that happens, instead of like top 50 ladder making it and qualifying tournaments making it to a bigger Masters tour where you can get some real like prizes from there and then try to, leverage that into maybe a Grandmasters program or just other things, in general that you can pursue competitive goals with. It's, I mean, you can't just have a high legend finish. You can't even necessarily have like a top 5 finish. You need multiple top 5 finishes. Like people are like, I need to gun for at least one rank 1 legend finish or something, as a realistic goal that they're setting for themselves if they're at the pinnacle of Hearthstone gameplay in order to actually make it to those high level competitive events. And that means that there's less innovation at the end of the month because it's too risky to innovate, for a lot of
Yeah.
people. And
Yeah.
when the innovation starts to dry up a little bit, so does the rest of the meta, and it keeps having ripple effects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the multiple finishes in a season is also a huge point because that means that, well, it might be the end of the season now, but at the start of next month, they're probably still going to have to focus on being pretty try hard, especially if they're kind of on the cusp of getting enough points to qualify. And then we've even seen things like the region, right, where points vary in Americas versus Europe, and the cutoff point is very different because of the way that the system works. So some people in maybe Europe have to try even harder to
Oh yeah.
really focus on that top pinnacle to get those points, and that means less innovation from them.
For instance,
So
world champion Bunny Hopper did not qualify to the Masters Tour because he missed out on having enough points for the Europe region, because the Europe region has been traditionally the most difficult region to actually, hit the top of ladder and qualify that way. Another
yeah,
well-known player, Norwis, who has had the distinction of having a triple rank 1 legend finish, which I think is the only person to have ever done that. Rank 1 legend on EU, Asia, and Americas. I think he did it at a time when there wasn't full like incentive for it, but
yeah,
regardless, it's an incredible achievement, and shows how good he is as a player. He didn't qualify for the Masters Tour. These are players that we absolutely would have benefited from having in the competitive scene, like visible on stream playing matches to see how well they play the game. Sadly, the system crowds them out because, hey, you get 16. You get all of Hearthstone. You can have 16 of them. You can have 16
yeah,
players that
yeah,
play in a Masters Tour. And then we're going to boil that down to 8 for Worlds.
yeah, yeah. And this is not to say that there's not people out there who are playing off meta decks or there's nobody doing innovation. Like we're definitely, not saying that, right? There's that you're still gonna have in Hearthstone like the funky monkeys who love doing off meta stuff. You're still gonna have the Brian Kibblers who just want to play wacky stuff and then put it on YouTube, right? You still
Oh yeah.
have the class kind of focused people like Sidisi who is gonna focus on playing hunter decks. But the visibility of those decks is still not as much as what kind of the top people do. And
Well, and
you know,
also, I mean, if people are trying their hardest to win, right? They're probably not
yeah,
playing the wacky concoctions
yeah,
made by some people who admittedly even themselves are saying, I'm not playing to try to win as many games as possible. I'm trying to develop a deck
right,
that I think is fun and
yeah,
win in my way some of the time.
yeah, and then yeah, and we have people in chat, saying like Zetalot for priest and Tic Tac, right? You have these kind of like class experts. You have these people who are focused on those wacky decks. So there are still people doing innovation even after balance patches like this, right? But again, kind of going back to talking about like the instant gratification of information, right? Even though those decks might be being played, there might be people out there testing a warrior deck and seeing how this might do, and maybe it does do okay. Maybe it's around 50%, which sounds
Could
great,
happen.
but people aren't going onto the data websites and saying, hey, let me like look for a deck that's 50% win rate. No, they're going onto the website to find the highest win percentage deck
Sort
so
by
that they can
lowest.
climb. Yeah, I
Sort
mean,
by lowest and refine it. You
so
can do it, Hearthstone community.
so there absolutely are people out there who are trying to innovate, who are trying to play these decks, but if they don't have the win rates on the data websites, if they don't have an audience, like maybe they're just not on social media, maybe they're doing pretty well with a deck but they're not on social media, they're not a content creator, or it's not as high of a win percentage on the data websites, then it's not going to be getting out to the general public as like, hey, try this deck. What's going to happen is maybe they're going to queue into somebody on ladder, and the opponent is going to go, wow, that deck seems really cool, or that deck seems good. Let me try that. And then they might try a deck that's even somewhat similar if they can't get the exact deck list, right? And then from there, it'll start to maybe go from there, but that can only go so far. Which is why I feel like, having these data websites, having the streamers, having these things are so impactful on the metas, and especially, as I said, with digital games. So there's kind of all of these layers, right? The information, the media, like the creators, timing of the season, the competitive system, the old decks still being pretty good, people's expectations of what's going to happen with meta, like all of that is kind of compounding together. And I think you mentioned this when you and I were talking about some stuff that's going on outside of gaming. You're like, man, when it rains, it pours. And that's kind of, I think,
Yeah.
what it feels like is happening right now. It's kind of like this thing that's not really great. This thing that's not really great. This thing that's pretty rough for like a new patch. And again, we've only been dealing with this patch for 24 hours. So it's just like all of these things, right, kind of compounding together and really layering together to make it seem like, wow, this patch is not doing anything, even though a ton of stuff was changed. So it's really kind of an unfortunate situation because, of course, we would love, with that expectation, right? You would love to say, oh, this almost 30 cards changed. Cool. There's going to be a bunch of new decks and fun decks, and it's going to feel great. And then it's just not.
I will say if there was nearly 30 nerfs, things probably would have changed a lot. But,
Fair.
buffs
Yeah.
and nerfs are dramatically different from how they impact the game.
Yeah, that's absolutely true as well. So that aspect of the patch, really adding in there as well. But it's just, again, like we're talking a lot about the Hearthstone, but I do think a lot of these concepts also apply to other card games, especially the digital ones. I've
Absolutely.
seen
Yeah.
all of these kind of arguments in the Magic community and Marvel Snap even,
Hmm.
and you kind of see these same things happen. So yeah, when you have a game that changes their cards, that has these balance patches, all of these kind of different things will impact how much, not just the cards themselves, which I think is also kind of weird. You would think, oh, just the cards that are changed are what's impacting the meta and the decks. But no, there's all of these other factors that are adding into that too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a constant, I think, in every digital card game that has enough of a presence to have like data aggregation websites and a whole lot of other things. It just um, creates this uh, immediate access type of reception to like changes that happen and what refinements are going on and how quickly people can just pick up on, oh, this is now the thing to do. And it's a very difficult. Like again, I just have to reiterate, I would never envy a game designer's or developer's job because it sounds impossible, and no one is ever gonna be happy, or at least
Yeah.
like
Yep.
the community at large. You can't say that they're ever happy. Someone's always complaining about something all of the time.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Yep. Uh so yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of factors that are going into this, and I'm sure as things develop even more, we'll see more changes. Um,
Yeah.
so
And
we'll see.
yeah, I like that take is like, hey, it's not the end of the world, all right? There's a balance patch for a reason, and there can be another one. They're going to let this meta develop as they should, assess what's happening, and then be like, okay, looks like we might need to make some more changes. So, like, just if you try to use some patience, I know it's a crazy idea in this day and age. Patience, what in my card game? But like, if you
No,
try to be a little patient for a little bit, you might wind up seeing some changes that will be to your liking in a little bit more time.
absolutely. Yeah. It's, I feel like their cadence has kind of been like a patch every, or some changes every like 2 to 3 weeks, which is pretty quick.
Yeah,
Some people might say that's still not fast enough. They want changes like all the time, and depending on how much you play. If you're somebody who plays every single day, or you play, 6, 8, 10 hours a day, or even that much 5 days a week, yeah, it's probably going to feel like you're seeing the same meta for a very long time uh, because you're playing a lot. But, I think for a lot of players, for probably the general player base, you're looking at, they might log in 1, 2, 3 times a week, might
yeah.
only play on their lunch break at work,
Like
and
two
so that's
weeks? Are
only,
you kidding? 2 weeks
yeah.
for a patch? But that's like 80 hours of Hearthstone that I'm playing. I can't
Yeah.
wait 80 hours. Well, okay, what if you did something else though? Like just for a little bit of that time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like, I do a lot of Hearthstone, but I try to play at least kind of casually some of the other games.
Yeah.
Our live chat, also bringing up Legends of Runeterra and Eternal. Yeah, all of these games have that kind of same thing. I play Legends of Runeterra pretty casually. All right. So, like, I log in and I'm like, oh, this event thing started 4 days ago. Oops,
Better get to it.
like, oh, they're doing a birthday celebration that started 3 days ago. Oh, because I don't log in as often. So for me, if I were to log in, you know, 2 times a week or something, and then all of a sudden it's like, I feel like I just played and now I'm playing again, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, everything changed. And like, oh, well, now this deck that I was playing doesn't work. Or like, oh, now I got to readjust to and try to learn this stuff, and things just changed again. That feels very bad. So yet they do have to balance the timing of the patches and how frequently they're doing those for all of the players as well. So yeah, there will be changes. They are doing changes more frequently. A lot of these games are starting to do more frequent changes. I think we've talked about that with Marvel Snap, even
Mhm.
how it feels like
Yeah.
Marvel Snap also has a pretty quick like balance, cadence, and release of new stuff. So a lot of these card games are kind of moving to that much more frequent changes. So whether you're someone who likes that or doesn't like that as much, just kind of be aware that those changes are happening. And if you're in a balance patch, post balance patch depression, I'll say post balance patch, and you're like, oh, this sucks. This didn't change. Yeah, just wait a little bit. Wait over these next 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, and we'll start getting some stuff. I mean, we're also, I'm sure, not that far away from mini sets and stuff too. So maybe there'll be some cool cards in there that change things up a bit. So, things will be changing soon again if you aren't enjoying it.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts there on before we start closing out?
Um, well, I think we've covered it. I'm looking forward to seeing hopefully some new developments in the meta in the near future. But if not, then I might be just looking forward to the next patch.
Okay,
And so the cycle continues.
that's fair. While everybody else is grinding for those top ranks, I'm still going to be grinding for Legend because this has been a really, really rough that I have not even hit Legend yet.
You'll get there.
It's been a long time for me since I have not hit like I usually hit legend in the first like 10 days of a month. So the fact that it's almost the end of the month and I am not there yet, I'm like, oh, I gotta hurry. And then I keep forgetting how close we are to the end of the month. And then I keep looking at the calendar going, oh no, whoa. Okay.
One of the
Uh,
one
so
of the
yeah.
activities from the Festival of Legends was beat up Dragon Rider.
It must have been, it was like that unsung, like it's a memo that went out to everybody else. And then here I am just like, new cards, fun theme, let's go. And then I'm like, oh, this is bad. Yeah, I can't figure this out. And then as soon as I'm like, okay, I think I'm starting to get this, I climbed to like rank, diamond 2. I was like, all right, cool. And then we had a patch. And I was like, oh, now I gotta
Like,
start all over.
uh-oh. I just figured things out. Yeah.
So yeah. So with that, let us know if you're somebody who enjoys the chaos of new patches. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And on that, if you are somebody who's looking to either join us, chat with us, any of that, please absolutely let us know. Reach out to us. You can reach out to us and get in touch with us via email at tccgroundtable@protonmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, TCCG Roundtable. You can even check out our Discord, and we have that linked in our top pinned tweet, or it'll be in our show notes or the description on YouTube. And speaking of that, you can also check out the live versions on my YouTube channel or streaming live, both YouTube and my Twitch channel, dragonrider TCCG. And you can also find us everywhere that you can listen to audio podcasts as soon as I am caught up with getting those out to audio versions. So I super apologize for getting last week's episode out, even not yet. So yeah, those will be coming really soon. It's been a very derailed week this week. But you know what? If you're also looking to get some sweet gear, accessories, that kind of stuff for card games, I should also pick up something for TCCG Con. But you can find things like play mats, like some cool dice, a bunch of other stuff like that, like card sleeves. I think there's a whole bunch of stuff through our affiliate, Inked Gaming. And if you use our link in the description, you can also help directly support us. So that would be amazing if you can do that. And how about where people can find us individually? Ron, where can people go to check out more from you?
Well, you can find me right here on Twitch, streaming Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern at RonMexico HS. You can find me on my YouTube channel at RonMexico HS, and you can find me on Twitter at Ron_HS. And what about for you, Dragon Rider? Where can they find you individually?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, DawnieDK. That's DAWNIEDK. And Twitch and YouTube, dragonrider TCCG. And then if you are into Hearthstone, especially standard Hearthstone, you can also check me out on the Dr. 3 Hearthstone podcast every week, where we focus on standard. And that is going to do it for this week. So thank you, Ron. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out in our live streams. And anybody listening on audio, thank you so much as well. And we'll see you at the roundtable.